when in a lot of cases we live in a meritocracy. You hire people that are like you, and you see that all over the place. And so people don't quite know where they are, and it's very easy to attack.
Reihan, has, in effect, the country moved on from the so-called racial reckoning we were all talking about after the murder of George Floyd?
I think there is a broad sense that racial reckoning involved smuggling in certain really contentious ideological ideas that weren't ultimately about diversity, but rather were about imposing ideological uniformity. When you're looking at DEI bureaucracies, what really is noxious about them is that they actually don't respect all sorts of diversity, including viewpoint diversity, including the fact that, look, in some cases, you have groups that are overrepresented, and that can be okay. You know, the point that J.D. Vance was making about the Dallas Mavericks is that it can be good and healthy and reasonable in some domains to have overrepresentation. And that means that underrepresentation can also be.
She said.
Well, you can say it's ridiculous. You can make that assertion, but fundamentally the fact that, you know, I am one second-generation Asian American on a panel of 4. I am massively, massively overrepresented. But I think it's reasonable to say that you're going to judge people based on their merits. And when you're looking at organizations that count that matter, that are high-performance organizations.
Excuse me. This is the burden, and I can't tell you how infuriating I find it. This is the burden that always comes with representation. The idea is that because you are a person of color, suddenly it is you are only there because it is some noblesse oblige. It is because some white guilt put you there because there was some DEI initiative, and you can't win either way you look at it. I mean, what infuriates me is you look at the whole Claudine Gay thing, and everyone's talking about DEI. This woman cannot win or lose either. If she is there,
I'm happy to talk about
no, let me
Claudine
finish.
Gay,
Let me finish. If she's there, it's because of DEI, that they put her there because she's black. If she loses and they kick her out, it's because she actually was never good enough to be there in the beginning, and she was. You can't win in this situation, and it is infuriating as a person of color to constantly have this cudgel put on our.
I get the argument you can't win, but you also can't have it both ways. You can't celebrate and tout that someone was hired, and it's a wonderful thing to expand diversity, and Harvard went full tilt talking about how great it was to hire the first black woman, and then say all of a sudden...
The first black person. It wasn't even the first black woman. It was the first black person.
I don't care. The point is that she got caught obviously plagiarizing, and those are the facts that, there's this massive...
This was an ideological, very well-funded...
The motives of the attack don't change the fact that she plagiarized. And where I disagree with you, Kara, is when you say...
When somebody fails who's white and who's a man... Let me finish.
You mean like
when
the
someone who fails...
Yes.
When someone... Nobody... In fact, there's books written about this. Fail and then come back. Look at Pivot. Exactly. Pivot. Nice way to get in your podcast. Pivot. And then when a person of color fails, all of a sudden it's an indictment of an entire system that the right doesn't like.
This is so ridiculous. She was a graduate of Exeter and Stanford with a PhD from Harvard.
And you know why?
Second generation Haitian American who came from a family that dominated the concrete industry in Haiti. She was not the wretched of the earth. She was someone who should be judged on her merits.
Her chief qualification.
Absolutely not. But she was selected because she established the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Harvard. She presided over a steep decline in the free speech climate. And she also targeted minority professors who dissented from her perspective. That was a problem. She was a person with ideas, not someone who belongs to a demographic category.
One thing that strikes a lot of women and people of color a lot, it seems like standards are only applied when it comes to women and people of color. I have seen so many incompetent men on boards of internet companies, and they always talk about, well, we're going to bring on a woman to be more diverse, when they have basically driven a company into a wall.
Do you remember Ruth Simmons, the president of Brown University?
Use the word standards with white men. We just don't.
And merit and all these other words. And let me just say one other thing.
The president of Brown University celebrated African-American women. No one questioned her credentials, her excellence as a steward of that institution.
Are you actually saying that what happened to Claudine Gay was not a completely engineered? I mean, it was... Chris Rufo said it. He actually admitted to the fact that this was an entirely engineered...
Chris Rufo, we just quickly should explain, a conservative activist who led the charge.
And my colleague who, look, this was not a concerted campaign out of whole cloth. This was based on ideological predilections.
Yes.
This was based on the fact that she was entrenching certain ideas. She was someone who was actually doing great damage to an important American institution.
In your opinion.
And what he was trying to do was surface the hypocrisy. You know, the idea that we are defending free speech when, in fact, free speech, Harvard literally ranked dead last among research universities in the country on the speech climate.
Women,
Reihan.
black people, Latinos, we're always the ones who have to sit here and say, you know what? It's exactly right. When we make a mistake, we have to wear the cloak of shame and say we never deserve to be here to begin with. And I'll say something else. And I just want to say this last thing when we're talking about DEI, which is, you know, there was this big push in 2020 thinking, okay, here we are. We've had a big racial reckoning. And you know what happened? All these DEI offices that were created, 75% of them were led by white men.
In any
and that's
case,
all I have to say about that.
I would recommend reading Mark Cuban on this because he really is smart. He's talking about building a business that's diverse for the future.
I got no
and to do
with
these
diverse
little tweets about
So how do we get
racism is not useful.
You can't fight. Look,
can
my problem
legislate
with DEI is it's
the other.
illiberal, right? It's speech policing. Claudine Gay got attention because she couldn't figure out how to speak clearly and with moral seriousness about anti-Semitism
is not illiberal.
while she's talking about DEI, right? She says, well, you know, except for the stuff about Jewish genocide, we believe in all of these other things. That's what got the attention to her, and she would still be there today if she wasn't a plagiarist.
Well,
that's the fact.
I am glad we settled this.